I thought reconnecting with my family after 11 years of silence would finally heal the wounds from my childhood. I was wrong. Dead wrong. My golden child brother didn't just steal my wife, he got her pregnant, convinced my parents to lie for them in court, and cost me nearly $50,000 in a divorce settlement that should never have happened. But here's the kicker. When I got promoted to senior manager last month, suddenly they all came crawling back. My mother showed up at my office, crying about how they were struggling financially. My brother, who'd been unemployed for months, was living off the alimony I was paying to my cheating ex-wife. And my parents, they'd blown through the settlement money trying to support their precious golden child and his new family. They wanted me to be the bigger person, to help them out, because family is family. They reminded me how they'd raised me, fed me, put a roof over my head. They conveniently forgot how they'd thrown me a graduation party for my brother, how they'd always made me feel like an outsider in my own home, how they'd sided with my cheating ex-wife when she painted me as the villain. But you know what? Sometimes the black sheep gets the last laugh. What I did next completely destroyed their lives, and honestly, I don't feel guilty about it for a single second. They taught me that family loyalty only goes one way, so I decided to give them a masterclass in consequences. This is the story of how my toxic family finally got exactly what they deserved, and how I learned that sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people face the reality of their own choices. My name's Alex, I'm 29 years old, and I work as a software engineer for a tech company in Austin, Texas. 2 months ago, I thought I had everything figured out. A solid career, a beautiful wife named Sarah, and after years of estrangement, I'd even started rebuilding my relationship with my family. Looking back now, I realize that was the beginning of the end. Let me paint you a picture of who I was in this story. I've always been the responsible one, the guy who gets his head down and works hard for everything he has. I put myself through college with student loans and part-time jobs, graduated with honors in computer science, and slowly climbed my way up the corporate ladder. I'm not the most charismatic guy in the room, but I'm reliable, honest, and I genuinely care about the people in my life. Maybe that was my biggest mistake. Sarah and I met 3 years ago at a mutual friend's barbecue. She was 25 then, working as a marketing coordinator for a local firm. She had this infectious laugh and this way of making everyone around her feel special. I fell hard and fast. She was everything I thought I wanted. Outgoing where I was reserved, spontaneous where I was planned, social where I was more of a homebody. We moved in together after 8 months, and I proposed exactly 2 years after we started dating. Our marriage seemed solid, at least from my perspective. We had our routine. I'd handle most of the household, finances, and maintenance. She'd take care of the social planning and decorating. We talked about having kids someday, maybe buying a bigger house in the suburbs. I worked long hours, but I always made sure to be present when I was home. Date nights every Friday, lazy Sunday mornings, the whole 9 yards. But here's where it gets complicated. My family situation. I have a twin brother named Marcus. Yes, we're the same age, born just 12 minutes apart, but you'd never know we were related if you met us. Where I'm methodical and quiet, Marcus is charming and impulsive. Where I had to work for everything, opportunities just seemed to fall into his lap. And my parents? They made it crystal clear from day one who their favorite was. Growing up, Marcus could do no wrong. He was the star athlete in high school, the one who got away with coming home past curfew, the one who got a car for his 16th birthday while I was told I needed to save up for my own. When we both applied to colleges, I got into a better engineering program, but somehow the celebration dinner ended up being about Marcus's acceptance to the local state school. The breaking point came during our high school graduation. I had been accepted to MIT with a partial scholarship, something I'd worked my ass off for, maintaining a 4.0 GPA while working weekends at a grocery store to help with family expenses. I was so excited to share the news, thinking finally, my parents would be proud of me. I came home that day expecting some kind of acknowledgement, maybe even a small celebration. Instead, I walked into our backyard to find a full-blown party in progress. Balloons, a cake, relatives I hadn't seen in months, the works. For a split second, I thought they'd planned this for me. Then I saw the cake. Congratulations, Marcus, on your college acceptance. My brother had gotten into the local state school with a 2.8 GPA and a mediocre SAT score. Meanwhile, my MIT acceptance letter was sitting on the kitchen counter, completely ignored. When I asked my parents why they hadn't thrown me a party for what was clearly the bigger achievement, my mother actually said, "We didn't want Marcus to feel left out. You should be trying to uplift your brother instead of making everything about yourself." That night, I made a decision that would define the next 11 years of my life. I was done. Done being the afterthought. Done being told to make myself smaller so Marcus could shine brighter. Done pretending that this was normal family behavior. I moved out the day I turned 18, took out additional student loans to cover my living expenses, and cut contact completely. I didn't go home for holidays, didn't call on birthdays, didn't even tell them when I graduated from MIT or when I got my first job. My parents never reached out either, which honestly hurt more than I wanted to admit. But it confirmed what I'd always suspected. I was never really part of their family equation anyway. For 11 years, I built my life without them. I made friends, dated, got promoted, bought a house, got married. I created the family I'd always wanted with Sarah, and I thought I was finally free from all that childhood baggage. But last year, something changed. Marcus reached out to me through Facebook. The message was simple. Hey, bro, I know it's been a long time, but Mom and Dad really miss you. We all do. Would you be open to meeting up sometime? No pressure, just think about it. I stared at that message for weeks before responding. Part of me wanted to delete it and pretend I'd never seen it. But another part of me, the part that still remembered being 12 years old and desperately wanting my parents' approval, was curious. Maybe they'd changed. Maybe they'd realized how badly they'd treated me. Maybe, just maybe, we could actually be a real family. So I said yes. And that decision would end up costing me everything I'd built in those 11 years of independence. The first meeting with my family, after 11 years, was scheduled at a neutral location, a small cafe downtown that none of us had any history with. I remember sitting in my car for 10 minutes before going in, my hands actually shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. Sarah had offered to come with me for moral support, but I declined. This was something I needed to face alone. When I walked into that cafe, I spotted them immediately. My parents had aged more than I'd expected. My father's hair had gone completely gray, and my mother looked smaller somehow, more fragile. Marcus, on the other hand, looked exactly like I remembered. Just older, still had that easy smile, still carried himself like the world owed him something. The conversation was awkward as hell at first. Lots of stilted small talk about the weather, my job, their retirement. My mother kept tearing up and apologizing for how things ended, though she never actually specified what she was apologizing for. My father mostly stayed quiet, occasionally nodding along. Marcus did most of the talking, which wasn't surprising. He'd always been the family spokesperson. We really screwed up, Alex, Marcus said about halfway through our coffee. I know we can't undo the past, but we want to try to make things right. You're our family, and we should have treated you better. It was exactly what I'd wanted to hear for 11 years. The validation, the acknowledgement, the admission that I hadn't been crazy or oversensitive. They actually seemed genuine, and despite every instinct telling me to be cautious, I found myself softening. We started meeting regularly after that, once a month at first, then more frequently. They came to our house for dinner a few times, and I even went to their place for my father's birthday. It felt surreal, sitting around the same dining room table, where I'd felt so invisible as a kid, but now they were actually listening when I spoke, asking about my work, showing interest in my life. Sarah was supportive, but cautious. Just take it slow, she'd say after they'd leave. People don't usually change overnight. Oh, I appreciated her concern, but I was honestly just relieved to finally have the family relationship I'd always craved. The dynamic between Marcus and me was still weird, though. He'd always been the golden child, and that hadn't really changed. My parents still lit up differently when he walked into a room, still laughed a little harder at his jokes, but he seemed to be making an effort to include me, to share the spotlight for once. When I got a promotion at work, he was the first to congratulate me. When Sarah and I talked about wanting kids, he got excited about being an uncle. Looking back, I can see how calculated it all was, but at the time it felt like genuine progress. The real turning point came about 6 months into our reconciliation. Sarah and I had been trying to get pregnant for a while, and we just started talking about maybe seeing a fertility specialist. Then out of nowhere, she surprised me with a positive pregnancy test on a random Tuesday morning. I was over the moon. We both were. This was everything we'd been hoping for. Our little family was finally going to be complete. I called my parents immediately to share the news, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was part of a real family celebration. My mother cried happy tears, my father actually hugged me when I saw him next, and Marcus seemed genuinely excited about becoming an uncle. This baby is going to be so lucky, Marcus said during one of our family dinners when Sarah was about 3 months along. Having parents like you two and grandparents who are going to spoil them rotten. Sarah glowed whenever Marcus talked about the baby. She'd always been social and friendly, but she seemed to really connect with my brother. They'd chat about movies, music, shared interests that I honestly didn't have much in common with either of them about. I was happy she was getting along with my family. It felt like everything was finally falling into place. Marcus started coming around more often after we announced the pregnancy. At first, it was just for family dinners or weekend barbecues, but then he began dropping by during the week too. Just wanted to check on my future nephew or niece, he'd say with that charming smile of his. I didn't think much of it initially. Marcus had always been more social than me, and Sarah enjoyed having company during the day while I was at work. She worked from home most days, doing freelance marketing consulting, so I figured she appreciated having someone to talk to. But then I started noticing little things that made me uncomfortable. The way Marcus would put his hand on Sarah's growing belly when he talked to the baby. How he'd bring her specific foods she was craving without her having to ask. The inside jokes they'd developed that I wasn't part of. Is it just me, or is Marcus around a lot lately? I asked Sarah one evening after he'd left from another impromptu visit. He's just excited about the baby, she said, not looking up from her laptop. It's sweet that he cares so much. I know, but don't you think it's a little much? The way he touches your stomach and talks to the baby like he's what, Alex? Sarah's tone had an edge to it that I rarely heard. I don't know, like he's more invested than a typical uncle would be. Sarah closed her laptop and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You're being paranoid. Marcus is finally making an effort to be a good brother and uncle, and you're finding problems with it. Maybe you should be grateful instead of suspicious. I dropped it after that, but the feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. Something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on exactly what. And every time I tried to bring it up, Sarah would shut me down or make me feel like I was being unreasonable. But tearing apart a family that had just started healing felt worse than ignoring my instincts. So I ignored them, and that decision would destroy everything. The warning signs started small, so subtle that I convinced myself I was imagining things. But looking back now, they were all there, screaming at me to pay attention. It began around Sarah's 4th month of pregnancy. Marcus had developed this habit of showing up unannounced, always with some excuse. He'd brought Sarah's favorite ice cream, or he wanted to help with some household project, or he just happened to be in the neighborhood. The frequency was what bothered me most. What had started as weekly visits became every few days, then almost daily. Don't you think Marcus is here a lot? I asked Sarah one Saturday morning, after he'd already called twice to see if we needed anything from the grocery store. He's being helpful, she replied, not looking up from her pregnancy book. I think it's nice that he cares. But it wasn't just the frequency. It was the intimacy of his behavior that made my skin crawl. Marcus would walk into our house like he lived there, grabbing drinks from our fridge without asking, sprawling on our couch like he owned it. And the way he interacted with Sarah's pregnancy was unsettling. I'll never forget the first time I saw him put his hands on her belly. We were having dinner at my parents' house, and Sarah mentioned feeling the baby kick. Before I could even react, Marcus was kneeling beside her chair, both hands pressed against her stomach. Hey there, little one, he whispered, his face inches from her belly. Uncle Marcus is here. The moment lasted maybe 30 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Sarah was smiling down at him with this soft expression I'd never seen her give anyone else. My parents were watching with these proud, approving looks, and I was sitting there feeling like an outsider at my own family dinner. Alex, come feel this, Sarah said, finally breaking the spell. But by the time I got over there, the baby had stopped moving. Marcus just shrugged and said, guess they only perform for their favorite uncle. Everyone laughed. I forced a smile. The physical contact became a regular thing after that. Every time Marcus came over, he'd find an excuse to touch Sarah's belly. He'd talk to the baby in this intimate, possessive way that made me want to punch him. And Sarah not only allowed it, she encouraged it. Marcus, come feel this, became her constant refrain whenever the baby was active. Never, Alex, come feel this when I was in another room. Always Marcus first. Then there were the gifts, expensive gifts. A top-of-the-line stroller that cost more than Marcus should have been able to afford on his retail job salary. A nursery mobile that played classical music and cost $300. Baby clothes from boutique stores that I'd never even heard of. Or, where is Marcus getting the money for all this stuff? I asked Sarah one evening as we assembled yet another elaborate baby gadget he'd brought over. He's been saving up, she said. He wants to spoil his first nephew or niece. Sarah, he works at Best Buy part-time. The stroller costs more than he makes in a month. Maybe he got a bonus. Maybe he's been saving longer than you think. Why do you always have to question everything nice that happens to us? That stung, because it wasn't true. I questioned Marcus's behavior because it felt wrong, not because I couldn't handle nice things happening to us. The conversations between them bothered me too. They'd developed this easy rapport that excluded me completely. They'd reference movies they'd watched together. When had they watched movies together? They'd laugh about conversations they'd had. When were they having conversations without me? When did you and Marcus watch The Notebook? I asked Sarah one night after overhearing them discuss it. Oh, last Tuesday when you were working late. He came over and I was feeling emotional, so we put on a movie. You hate romantic movies. Pregnancy changes your taste in everything, Alex. You should know that by now. But I did know that. I knew Sarah better than anyone, and she'd always made fun of sappy romantic movies. The fact that she'd not only watched one with my brother, but enjoyed it enough to have an in-depth conversation about it, felt like a betrayal of something I couldn't quite name. The final straw came during Sarah's 6th month. I came home from work early one Friday to find Marcus's car in our driveway. Nothing unusual there, except when I walked into the house, I could hear Sarah laughing from the living room in a way that made my stomach drop. I found them on our couch, sitting closer than necessary, looking at something on Sarah's phone. When they saw me, they jumped apart like teenagers caught making out. "Alex," Sarah said, her voice too bright, too cheerful. "You're home early." "Yeah, I finished up my project ahead of schedule." I looked between them, trying to read the situation. "What are you guys looking at?" "Just baby stuff," Marcus said, but he was avoiding eye contact. "Showing Sarah some funny videos I found." The energy in the room was all wrong. There was this charged atmosphere, like I'd interrupted something intimate. Sarah was flushed, Marcus was fidgety, and I felt like a stranger in my own living room. That night, after Marcus left, I tried to talk to Sarah about it. "Is everything okay between you and Marcus?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, you guys seem close. Closer than I'm comfortable with." Sarah's expression hardened. "Are you seriously accusing me of something right now?" "I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just saying that the dynamic feels off to me." "The dynamic feels off because you're looking for problems where there aren't any. Marcus is being a good brother and a good uncle-to-be. If you can't handle that, maybe the problem is with you, not us." "Us," she said. "Us," like she and Marcus were a unit, and I was the outsider. But the moment that really broke me happened 2 weeks later. I was working from home, taking calls in my office, when I heard Sarah call out from the living room, "Oh my God, Marcus, feel this! The baby is going crazy!" I wrapped up my call as quickly as I could and went to join them. When I got to the living room, Marcus was kneeling in front of Sarah, both hands on her belly, his ear pressed against her stomach. "I think they recognize my voice," he said, grinning up at her. "I think you're right," Sarah replied, running her fingers through his hair. The gesture was so intimate, so unconsciously affectionate, that it hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't uncle behavior. This wasn't even close friend behavior. This was something else entirely. "What's going on here?" I asked, my voice coming out sharper than I intended. They both looked at me with identical guilty expressions. "Nothing," Sarah said quickly. "The baby was just being really active and Marcus wanted to feel." "Right," I said slowly. "And the hair thing?" "What hair thing?" But Sarah's face was red now, and Marcus was standing up, putting distance between them. "You were running your fingers through his hair, Sarah." "I was not. You're seeing things that aren't there." But I wasn't seeing things. I knew what I'd witnessed. And the way they were both looking at me now, like I was the problem, like I was the one making things weird, made me feel crazy. "Maybe I should go," Marcus said, already heading for the door. "Yeah," I said. "Maybe you should." After he left, Sarah and I had our first real fight since we'd gotten married. She accused me of being paranoid, jealous, and controlling. I accused her of being inappropriate with my brother. Neither of us backed down, and we went to bed angry. But that night, lying awake next to my wife, I made a decision. I was going to start paying closer attention, because something was definitely wrong, and I was going to figure out what it was. The truth has a way of revealing itself when you're finally ready to see it. For me, that moment came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday night in Sarah's 7th month of pregnancy. I'd been having trouble sleeping for weeks. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd replay moments between Sarah and Marcus, analyzing every glance, every touch, every inside joke that excluded me. The rational part of my brain kept telling me I was being paranoid, but my gut was screaming that something was very, very wrong. That particular night, Sarah's phone kept buzzing on her nightstand, text after text, the screen lighting up every few minutes. She was sleeping deeply. Pregnancy had made her a heavy sleeper, but the constant notifications were keeping me awake. After the 10th buzz, I couldn't take it anymore. I carefully reached over and grabbed her phone, planning to just put it on silent mode. But when the screen lit up, I saw the preview of the latest message. "Can't wait to hold our baby in my arms. Love you both so much." The sender, Marcus. Our baby. Not the baby or your baby. Our baby. My hands were shaking as I stared at that message. There had to be an explanation. Maybe he meant our, as in our family's baby. Maybe it was just poor word choice. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But I had to know. I looked over at Sarah, still sleeping peacefully, one hand resting on her belly. My wife, the mother of my child, the woman I'd trusted with everything I had. With trembling fingers, I unlocked her phone. I knew her passcode. We'd never hidden anything from each other. At least I thought we hadn't. The first thing I saw when I opened her messages was Marcus's name at the top of the list. They'd been texting constantly, multiple times a day, every day, for months. I scrolled up to the beginning of their conversation thread, and what I found destroyed my world. The messages started innocent enough, Around the time we'd reconnected with my family, just friendly exchanges, Marcus asking how Sarah was doing, Sarah thanking him for being so welcoming. But somewhere around her 3rd month of pregnancy, the tone shifted. Marcus, you look absolutely radiant today. Pregnancy suits you. Sarah, thank you. Alex barely notices anymore. He's so focused on work. Marcus, his loss. If you were mine, I'd never stop telling you how beautiful you are. Sarah, Marcus, we shouldn't talk like this. Marcus, why not? It's just the truth. I felt sick reading it, but I couldn't stop. The messages got progressively more intimate, more inappropriate. Marcus complimenting Sarah's body, Sarah complaining about feeling neglected by me, both of them dancing around something that was becoming increasingly obvious. Then I found the message that confirmed my worst fears. From 2 months ago, Sarah, I can't stop thinking about yesterday. Marcus, me neither. You felt so perfect. Sarah, this is crazy. We can't keep doing this. Marcus, I know, but I can't help myself. I've wanted you since the moment Alex introduced us. Sarah, what if he finds out? Marcus, he won't. He's too trusting, too naive. He sees what he wants to see. They were having an affair. My wife and my brother were having an affair, but it got worse. So much worse. I kept scrolling, finding messages about secret meetings, about times they'd been together when I thought Sarah was at doctor's appointments or Marcus was at work. Messages about how guilty they felt, but how they couldn't stop. Messages about how this was meant to be. And then I found the message that shattered what was left of my heart. Marcus, got the results back from the doctor. Sarah, and? Marcus, it's definitely mine. Due date matches perfectly with when we first, Sarah, I can't believe this is happening. Marcus, are you going to tell him? Sarah, I can't, not yet. Maybe after the baby is born, we can figure out how to handle this. Marcus, what if he wants a paternity test? Sarah, he won't. He's too excited about being a dad. He trusts me completely. Marcus, and after? When the baby looks nothing like him? Sarah, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Maybe we can convince him the baby just takes after my side of the family. I was carrying another man's child, my brother's child, and they were planning to let me believe it was mine, potentially forever. The phone slipped from my hands and clattered onto the nightstand. Sarah stirred but didn't wake up. I sat there in the dark, staring at her sleeping form, trying to process what I'd just learned. Everything made sense now. Marcus's obsessive interest in the pregnancy, the way he touched Sarah's belly like he had a right to, the expensive gifts, the intimate conversations, the way they looked at each other. I was the fool, the naive, trusting husband who'd been played by his own wife and brother. But the messages didn't stop there. I picked up the phone again, needing to know the full extent of their betrayal. What I found was a detailed plan for my destruction. Marcus, we need to be smart about this. If we're going to be together, we need to make sure Alex doesn't fight the divorce. Sarah, what do you mean? Marcus, I mean we need to make him look like the bad guy. Make it seem like you had reasons to cheat. Sarah, I'm not comfortable lying about him in court. Marcus, it's not lying if we frame it right. You can say he was emotionally distant, that he prioritized work over family, that he made you feel neglected and unwanted. Sarah, that's not entirely untrue. Marcus, exactly, and I can back you up. Tell them how you'd call me crying about how he treated you. Sarah, what about your parents? Marcus, they'll support us. They always have. Alex burned that bridge when he cut contact for 11 years. They'll see this as him abandoning family again. Sarah, and financially? Marcus, you'll get alimony, maybe even part of his assets if we play this right. Plus, I'll be working again soon. We can make this work. They weren't just planning to destroy my marriage. They were planning to destroy my entire life. And they wanted to take my money, turn my family against me, and raise my brother's child on my dime. The final message thread was from just a few hours earlier. Marcus, Alex seemed suspicious today. Do you think he knows something? Sarah, no, he's just being paranoid like always. But we should be more careful. Marcus, maybe we should tell him soon. Get ahead of this. Sarah, not yet. I want to make sure the baby is healthy first. And we need to have our story straight. Marcus, what story? Sarah, that this happened because he pushed me away, that I found comfort in you because he wasn't there for me emotionally. Marcus, think he'll buy it? Sarah, he'll have to. What choice will he have? I set the phone down and looked at my wife, really looked at her. This woman sleeping peacefully beside me, carrying my brother's child, planning to destroy my life and make me pay for the privilege. The rage that hit me was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It was pure, white-hot fury that made my vision blur and my hands shake. I wanted to wake her up right then and there, to scream at her, to demand answers. I wanted to call Marcus and tell him exactly what I thought of him. I wanted to drive to my parents' house and show them what their precious golden child had done. But I didn't do any of those things. Instead, I got up quietly, went to my office, and started taking screenshots of every single message, every confession, every plan, every detail of their betrayal. I saved them to a secure cloud account, emailed copies to myself, and printed out the most damning ones. By the time the sun came up, I had everything I needed to destroy them the same way they'd planned to destroy me. Sarah woke up around 7, stretching and smiling at me like nothing had happened. "Good morning, baby," she said, reaching over to touch my arm. "You're up early." I looked at her hand on my arm, the same hand that had been running through my brother's hair, the same hand that had been typing messages about how naive and trusting I was. "Couldn't sleep," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Everything okay?" She sat up, her hand moving to her belly in that protective gesture I'd once found so endearing. "Everything's fine," I lied, "just excited about the baby." She smiled, on that radiant smile that had made me fall in love with her 3 years ago. "Me too. I can't wait for you to meet our little one." Our little one. The lie rolled off her tongue so easily. "Sarah," I said carefully, "there's something I need to ask you." Her expression shifted slightly, a flicker of something, fear, crossing her face. "What is it?" I looked into her eyes, these eyes I'd trusted completely, and made my decision. "Would you be okay with getting a paternity test, just for peace of mind?" The color drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. And that's when I knew for certain that everything I'd read was true. The silence that followed my paternity test request stretched for what felt like an eternity. Sarah's face had gone completely white, and I watched as a dozen different emotions flickered across her features. Panic, guilt, calculation, and finally, resignation. "Why would you ask that?" she whispered, her hand instinctively moving to her belly. "Just to answer the question, Sarah. Would you be okay with the paternity test?" She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. I don't understand why you'd even think to ask that. Don't you trust me?" The irony of that question almost made me laugh. "Do you have a reason I shouldn't trust you?" That's when she broke. I watched my wife of 2 years completely crumble in front of me, tears streaming down her face as she buried her head in her hands. "Alex, I can explain," she sobbed. "It's not what you think." "Really? Because what I think is that you've been sleeping with my brother and the baby you're carrying isn't mine. Am I wrong?" The way her shoulders shook told me everything I needed to know. "How long?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. "Alex, please." "How long, Sarah?" She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. Since your 4th month of pregnancy." "Try again." I saw the messages, Sarah. All of them. Her face crumpled completely. "Since the 2nd month," she whispered. "It started the 2nd month." "So almost the entire time you've been pregnant." She nodded, unable to speak. "And the baby?" It's Marcus's." Hearing her say it out loud was somehow worse than reading it in the messages. This woman I'd loved, trusted, planned a future with, had been lying to my face for months while carrying another man's child. "Were you ever going to tell me?" "We talked about it. After the baby was born, we thought maybe..." "You thought maybe you'd let me raise my brother's kid while paying you alimony for the privilege?" Her silence was answer enough. I stood up and walked to my office, returning with the printed screenshots. I dropped them on the bed in front of her. "I know about all of it, Sarah. The affair, the planning, the lies you were going to tell in divorce court. I know about how you and Marcus were going to paint me as the villain while you lived off my money." She stared at the papers, her face somehow getting even paler. "Alex, I'm so sorry. We never meant for it to happen this way." "Well, no, you meant for it to happen exactly this way. You just didn't mean to get caught." Over the next hour, the whole sordid story came out. How Marcus had pursued her almost from the moment they met. How she'd initially resisted but felt neglected because of my long work hours. How one evening, when I was working late, Marcus had come over to check on her, and one thing led to another. It was supposed to be just once, she cried. But then it kept happening, and I couldn't stop, and when I found out I was pregnant, you knew it wasn't mine. The timing, it could have been yours. There was a chance, but you knew it wasn't. I hoped it was yours. I really did. The lies just kept coming. Even now, caught red-handed with evidence of her betrayal, she was still trying to manipulate the narrative. I called my lawyer that morning. By afternoon, I'd filed for divorce and had served Sarah with papers. The look of shock on her face when the process server showed up was almost worth the pain of the previous 24 hours. "You're really doing this?" she asked after the man left. "Did you think I wouldn't?" I thought we could work through this. Go to counseling, figure things out. Sarah, you're pregnant with my brother's baby, and you were planning to lie about it for the rest of our lives. What exactly is there to work through? That evening, Marcus showed up at our house. I'd been expecting him. Sarah had probably called him the moment she got served. Alex, we need to talk, he said when I opened the door. No, we really don't. Look, I know you're upset. Upset? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Marcus, you slept with my wife and got her pregnant. Upset doesn't begin to cover what I am. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? You had a plan, right? Let me raise your kid while you and Sarah figured out how to be together on my dime? His face flushed. You don't understand. Sarah and I, we have something real. Something you never gave her. What I never gave her? I gave her everything. A home, financial security, love, commitment. What did you give her? A few stolen afternoons and a pregnancy that's going to destroy both your lives? We love each other. You loved the idea of taking something that was mine, just like when we were kids. You couldn't stand that I had something you didn't, so you took it. That's not, get out of my house, Marcus, and don't come back. But the real devastation came when my parents arrived the next day. I'd called them, thinking they deserved to know what their golden child had done. I thought maybe, finally, they'd see Marcus for who he really was. I was wrong. Alex, honey, my mother said, sitting across from me in my living room. We know this is hard, but maybe this is for the best. For the best? Mom, Marcus destroyed my marriage. Marriages end sometimes, my father added, but family is forever. Maybe Sarah and Marcus are better suited for each other. I stared at them in disbelief. Are you seriously taking his side right now? We're not taking sides, my mother said. We just think that if Sarah and Marcus have found happiness together, maybe you should try to be supportive. Supportive of my wife cheating on me with my brother? You've always been so angry, Alex, my father said. So resentful. Maybe this is a chance for you to let go of that anger and focus on what's really important. Family. That's when I realized nothing had changed. 11 years later, and I was still the problem in their eyes. Marcus could do no wrong, even when he'd objectively destroyed my life. I asked them to leave. They did, but not before my mother said, "We hope you'll reconsider. The baby will need all the family they can get." The baby, my brother's baby, that my parents expected me to help raise like nothing had happened. That night, alone in the house I'd shared with Sarah, I made a decision that would define the rest of my life. I was done with all of them. The divorce proceedings were a nightmare that lasted 3 months. 3 months of lawyers, depositions, and watching my family systematically destroy my reputation to protect Marcus and Sarah. My parents testified that I'd always been difficult and emotionally distant. They painted a picture of a man who was so focused on work that he neglected his wife's emotional needs. Marcus played the role of the concerned brother who'd simply been there to comfort Sarah when I wasn't. The most painful part wasn't even the lies they told. It was how easily they told them. My mother, who'd raised me for 18 years, sat in that courtroom and described me as cold and controlling. My father nodded along as Marcus claimed he'd only gotten involved with Sarah after she'd confided in him about how unhappy she was in our marriage. Sarah's performance was Oscar-worthy. She cried on cue, talked about feeling isolated and neglected, claimed that I'd pressured her to quit her job and become financially dependent on me. None of it was true. But with my family backing up her story, it became the official narrative. I lost almost everything in that divorce. The house we'd bought together, half of my savings, and a monthly alimony payment that would continue until Sarah remarried, which, conveniently, she and Marcus had decided to postpone until the dust settled. But you know what? Losing those material things taught me something valuable about myself. I realized that I'd been so focused on trying to build the perfect life, the perfect marriage, the perfect family reconciliation, that I'd ignored every red flag along the way. I'd wanted so desperately to believe that my parents had changed, that they finally saw me as an equal to Marcus, that I'd overlooked their continued favoritism. When Marcus started showing excessive interest in Sarah's pregnancy, I'd pushed down my instincts because I didn't want to rock the boat of our fragile family reunion. I'd been so grateful to finally have my family back that I'd ignored the fact that the fundamental dynamic hadn't changed at all. Marcus was still the golden child who could do no wrong, and I was still the scapegoat who was expected to sacrifice for his happiness. The months after the divorce were the darkest of my life. I moved into a small apartment across town, threw myself into work, and tried to rebuild my sense of self. I went to therapy, something I probably should have done years earlier, and started unpacking the childhood trauma that had made me so desperate for my family's approval. Dr. Martinez, my therapist, helped me understand that I'd been living my entire adult life trying to prove I was worthy of love. That's why I'd worked so hard to be the perfect husband, why I'd been so eager to reconcile with my family, why I'd ignored obvious warning signs about Sarah and Marcus. You can't earn love from people who aren't capable of giving it, she told me during one of our sessions. And you can't fix relationships with people who don't see you as an equal. It was a hard lesson to learn, but a necessary one. I also learned something about forgiveness. Specifically, that forgiveness doesn't mean accepting unacceptable behavior. For years, I'd confused being the bigger person with being a doormat. I'd thought that setting boundaries made me petty or vindictive. But watching my family rally around Marcus and Sarah while painting me as the villain taught me that some people will take advantage of your kindness until you have nothing left to give, and that protecting yourself from those people isn't cruel. It's necessary. The hardest part was accepting that the family I'd always wanted, the one where I was valued and respected, had never actually existed. It was a fantasy I'd been chasing since childhood, and it had cost me my marriage and my financial security. But losing that fantasy also freed me in ways I hadn't expected. I stopped checking my phone, hoping for apologies that would never come. I stopped making excuses for people who'd shown me exactly who they were. I stopped trying to be perfect enough to earn love from people who'd already decided I wasn't worth it. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I got a promotion at work. Senior software engineer, significant pay raise, better benefits. For the first time in my adult life, I celebrated an achievement without wondering if my family would be proud of me. I took myself out to dinner at an expensive restaurant, bought a bottle of wine that cost more than I used to spend on groceries in a week, and toasted to my own success. It was the first genuinely happy moment I'd had in over a year. That's when I made my biggest mistake. I posted about it on social media. Within 24 hours, my mother was calling. Within a week, she was showing up at my office. And within a month, I was sitting in their living room, listening to them ask for money to support the life they'd built on the ruins of mine. But this time, I was ready for them. The confrontation at my parents' house was just the beginning. What followed was a masterclass in how toxic people escalate when their usual manipulation tactics stop working. After I refused to give them money and left them standing in the rain, the harassment began almost immediately. My mother called 17 times that first night. When I stopped answering, she started texting. When I blocked her number, she had Marcus call. When I blocked him too, they showed up at my apartment. You can't just abandon your family, my father said, when I opened the door to find all three of them standing in my hallway. Watch me, I replied, and closed the door in their faces. But they didn't give up. They tried everything. Guilt trips, threats, even attempting to get my coworkers involved by calling my office and claiming there was a family emergency. My boss, thankfully, saw right through it and told them not to call again. The final straw came when Sarah called me, sobbing about how they were going to lose the house and how the baby needed stability. She actually had the audacity to suggest that I should help for the sake of the child. Sarah, I said calmly, that child has a father. His name is Marcus. Maybe he should get a job. That's when she threatened to take me back to court for higher alimony payments, claiming my promotion meant I could afford to pay more. Big mistake. This time, I was ready to fight. I hired a better lawyer, gathered evidence of their affair, and prepared to expose every lie they'd told during our divorce. I reached out to mutual friends who could testify about what had really happened. I even got my cousins involved, people who'd witnessed my childhood and could speak to the family dynamics that had led to this mess. When we went back to court, I came armed with screenshots of Marcus and Sarah's messages, testimony from friends about their affair, and evidence that Sarah had lied about being financially dependent on me. The judge was not pleased to learn that the previous ruling had been based on fabricated claims. Not only did I get the alimony payment stopped, but Sarah was ordered to pay back a portion of what she'd already received. The look on my family's faces when the ruling came down was worth every penny I'd spent on legal fees. But they still weren't done. The night after the court ruling, they showed up at my house one last time. All of them. My parents, Marcus, and Sarah, who was now visibly pregnant and using her condition to try to garner sympathy. You've destroyed us, my mother said, tears streaming down her face. Your own family? No, I replied, standing in my doorway but not letting them in. You destroyed yourselves. I just stopped enabling it. Marcus tried to get physical, grabbing my shirt and threatening to make me pay for what I'd done. But I was done being intimidated by my brother. I calmly told him that if he didn't get off my property immediately, I'd call the police and have him arrested for assault. My father tried one last guilt trip. We raised you, fed you, put a roof over your head for 18 years. Doesn't that mean anything to you? You did the bare minimum required by law, I said. That doesn't give you the right to destroy my life as an adult. That was 8 months ago. I haven't heard from any of them since. The baby was born 3 weeks ago. I know because Marcus posted about it on social media before I blocked him there too. A little girl. She looks exactly like Marcus did as a baby, which must have been awkward for Sarah to explain if anyone asked. I don't feel guilty about not being involved. That child has 2 parents who chose each other and chose to destroy my life in the process. They can figure out how to support their family without my help. My life now is quiet, peaceful, and entirely my own. I've been dating someone new, a woman named Jessica who thinks my boundaries are healthy, not cruel. She can't believe the story when I tell her, but she's never once suggested I should give them another chance. I've learned that family isn't about blood. It's about respect, loyalty, and genuine care for each other's well-being. The people who raised me and the brother I shared a womb with never gave me any of those things. But the friends who supported me through the divorce, the therapist who helped me heal, and the woman who loves me now, they're my real family. Sometimes people ask if I ever regret cutting them off completely. The answer is no, not for a single second. You can't miss something you never really had. And what I have now, peace, self-respect, and relationships built on honesty, is worth more than all the money they took from me. The black sheep finally found his real flock, and we're doing just fine without the wolves.